Assalamu alaikum and welcome to everyone on the parenting show on Inspire FM. Today we have a very important topic we want to discuss, and we have a just equally important guest to come online and discuss it with us. Talking to our children about Gaza. Gaza, of course, has been going on for almost 2 years now, just a little under, and the irony of it is that every day we see children on our screens, the horrific scenes we see. However, what are we saying to the children on this side of the fence? How are we talking to them? How are we breaking these horrific images? What are we building in our children regarding Gaza? What do we want them to hold? There's a propaganda war that will not allow people to see the rock bottom solid truth. Do we want our children to fall for this? How do we counter this? And we have a very special guest on the show tonight. He is Omar Hussein. Omar Hussein is a very seasoned speaker. He's a khatib. He's been in the field of dawah for over 20 years. Um, Beyond that, of course, he's a father of four, and he really, over the last almost 2 years, I have seen so much of Omar Hussein on social media defending um, the corner of the Palestinians for justice, for liberation, for the double calling out the double standards. Omar himself is a Palestinian, so no one better than to talk about it than Omar himself. I know Omar's family were part of the first Nakba in 48, so I'm sure he will have a lot of stories to tell. And I'm sure he was a child, or at least he's being recalled some stories of his childhood. So, without wasting any more time, Omar, salamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Welcome on the show tonight, Omar, and I'm glad you had the time to join us.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you.
Omar, firstly, really, my heartfelt, I'm lost for words. I can't say grief, I can't say sorrow. These words are not strong enough, but what you, your family, the wider people of Palestine are facing is horrendous. And sometimes when I speak to people from that part of the world, Omar, I am filled with shame. I got to admit it. Not shame because I am silent or I'm not doing anything, but I'm always looking for what more can I do for the people of Palestine? What more can I do for these special people from Bilad Sham, from the blessed land? And although I try, it's just inside me, it stirs a sense of hopelessness and a sense of despair sometimes. But then I remember, of course, Allah is the best of planners, and He will protect this Ummah, and He will grant us victory. Um, the first thing, Omar, I would really, really like to hear from you is I want to go back to the very first displacement. Your
Mm,
family were part and parcel of the first Nakba. Over almost three-quarter of a million people
that's
displaced.
right. Yeah.
Um, and your family, your father, your mother was one of them. Almost three-quarters of a million, 750,000. Your childhood, Omar. Let's start with your childhood. Tell me about your childhood, um, having having gone through this. Your father having gone through this. Do you recall it yourself, or obviously you were of not of age, or you wasn't born? But do you recall your mother and father relating this horrendous journey?
Yeah. I mean, it's very much part of the fabric of the family, having gone through the Nakba and experiencing that firsthand, being one of those 750,000 people, as you say, and losing your home, your land, your livelihood, and then being made refugees in your own land is obviously a momentous thing in your life. It's a huge event in your life. And my father, he's still around with us today, so he's nearing 90, but he still
Wow.
vividly remembers those stories. And what I've tried to do is I've tried to be that person who amplifies his message to the world,
Subhanallah.
because it's such an important story, and there's not that many. There's only a few thousand Nakba survivors who are of age, who would have remembered the
Sure.
events. There would have been many people, very, very young babies who won't remember, but he was 12 years old. So
Wow.
it was very much part of the fabric of our life. So my dad taught it to me, my mother, and I visited Palestine many times myself. I've had
Right.
many family members who have been martyred over the last 77 years. So it's very much a part of a Palestinian's life, and it won't be unique to me. The people of Gaza, their story is much more tragic, and the people that have been slaughtered over the last 20 months, there's really nothing that compares to that. It makes the first Nakba seem something much, much smaller in terms of the catastrophe that we're facing now.
Sure. Omar, what are if you can give us a few insights into what your father, and Allah bless him, at 90, mashallah, your father, the insights your father has given on this journey. He was obviously kicked out of his home, kicked out of his hometown, and displaced.
Yeah.
What does your father recall to you? And do you remember the first time he told you this story as a child?
I think it's one of those where it's like a series of stories and events, and it makes up your character 40 whatever years later. So yeah, it was something that we remember from a very, very young age. I remember hearing about my cousins being imprisoned when I was just a young boy, primary school. I heard about the story of the Nakba in detail throughout my life, but I guess in the last couple of years, I've really taken the details to heart and tried to explain to people how tragic it was. There's one story that I like to tell, and it goes back to childhood. Actually, it was a story that my uncle told. Well, my uncle passed away a few years ago, and my cousin told me a story about his last few hours of life. So it was in Jordan, actually, just before the genocide on Gaza started in the summer of 2023. He was telling me a really powerful story that when my uncle was passing away, he asked for my father. He actually said, "Where's Fuad? Tell him to come because we need to go and wash the horses with my granddad." And they were all very surprised, like, what are you talking about? What horses? What Fuad? They were so shocked. And then my father told them the story after he passed away. He said that me and your father, we would go and wash the horses in Caesarea. It's a coastal town in Palestine near where they lived near Haifa.
Yeah.
And they would wash the horses before they would sell them. So it was so amazing that, imagine this man, my uncle was in his 70s at this point. Imagine he's lived a very long life, had many children, many grandchildren. He lived in Jordan, in Kuwait, in the UAE. But the story that he remembered before he passed away was washing the horses with his brother and his father to sell them. So the connection to your land, to your livelihood, it's innate. It's something very close to you. And I think these are one of the many stories that really inspire us to continue carrying that call and to continue pushing for justice, really.
Sure. And Omar, before we get to your children, yes, we all talk about, being firm, standing tall, standing in the face of hypocrisy, standing in the face of contradiction. But, like I in the morning have bread, and everyone gets up and has their standard staple diet. It seems that the people of Palestine, and even more so the children of Palestine, it looks like resistance is their staple diet. I've never, ever in my life seen a generation who live, breathe, sleep, eat, hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
I've never seen a generation as young as that who eat, sleep, breathe, hasbunallah wa ni'mal. This is all they live off. So in your DNA, if I'm allowed to use these words, in your DNA, this resistance must be, subhanallah, it must be taught at a very, very young age.
Yeah, I can't claim that I have the resistance of the people of Palestine who live there. I mean, maybe there's a tiny little fraction that we get, but no, they are different. The people of Gaza in particular, and I do mention that. And it's not to take away from the Palestinians in the West Bank and those struggling elsewhere, but the people of Gaza in particular, to be under the calamity and the catastrophe that they're facing now, and to still stand strong. I mean, there was a video just today, subhanAllah, just to echo the words you've mentioned, of a young boy who was saying, do not go to the aid centers. this where they slaughtered over 100 Palestinians who were seeking aid.
Correct.
He goes, keep your honor and do not, go down to their level. So it's amazing that this child was telling the people of Gaza, don't, bring yourself down to this, terrible level where you're begging them for food and you're being shot at when you're trying to access this food. So it's a really amazing characteristic, even in the young children, as you say.
Yeah. And have your children, now coming to the children's side, have your children visited often before this?
They've been a couple of times. I've taken them. I even took my in-laws with me as well, who are not from Palestine, they're from Bangladesh.
Oh, mashallah.
And it's a really important, I think, journey for every Muslim, by the way. It's not something that should be seen as a Palestinian thing. This is the land of Islam and a history that's amazing for 1400 years. So we went to Al-Quds. We visited the family in Nur Shamis, which is one of the refugee camps that's been completely destroyed, and the people have been forced out of their homes. They've witnessed that themselves. They saw the pictures of the martyrs of my cousins. So they really did immerse themselves in the life of the Palestinians, and they saw what it was. Firsthand, they managed to grasp that history really for themselves.
Sure. And it makes it, I mean, the importance, of course, the importance is there, the Al-Aqsa and Bilad al-Sham and the blessed land, and all this is important. But Omar, as I'm obviously following news and watching events unfold in Palestine, I read some comments of even some non-Muslims. Yeah. And even they say, once it's all over, we want to visit this blessed place because it gives rise to very strong, blessed people. And some of the non-Muslims are saying, we'd like to just come and shake your hands after it's all over.
Yeah,
I mean, this whole injustice has moved the whole world, actually. It's not just the issue of Muslims. It's moved the whole world.
So you're so right. I mean, to be honest, I received a WhatsApp message this morning from a consultant. He's a doctor, and he said to me, what's wrong with the world? How can people not be absolutely enraged with what's happening in Gaza to the children? He goes, are my children of no value? Would my children also be treated in this way? And he mentioned that because his children are also mixed race, and he wondered whether it was to do with this kind of privilege of Western privilege versus kind of the third world or the developing world. And what was really amazing is that it affected this man so much, who has a very privileged life. He has a good job. He's a private consultant. His kids go to private school. And I could see this man being so affected by what's happening in Gaza. And I've witnessed that across so many people through so many interactions with non-Muslims. So it's definitely something that's touched humanity. I think a lot of people would have seen the Question Time show last week, where a woman, the lady in pink, I believe, and she questioned the panelists so strongly,
very passionately,
away with it. And I had so much respect for her. And in fact, it sometimes makes me wonder why Muslims are not more passionate about something that's so important. But yes, definitely, this has actually really woken up the world. And I think we have to appreciate that. It's way beyond an injustice that's afflicted the Muslim community or the Palestinians.
Of course. And now the journey of your children, Omar. You know, where I'm sat, where my family is up and down the country in different parts of the world, we hear your uncle passed away of heart attack, your aunt passed away of high blood pressure, your such and such passed away because of liver failure or kidney failure. I'm no doubt, I'm sure you, over this last almost 2 years, that you have faced a situation where there are many shaheed from your family over this during this period, correct?
They have been, many.
How do you break this to the kids?
I think you want to make sure that you follow. The people of Gaza have given us a blueprint, and you don't want to be the person who shows weakness when they've shown so much bravery and resilience, as you've said. So we've lost 4 members of our family in the West Bank during the genocide. But the most difficult event for me in terms of directly related to Gaza is that my niece, her family is from Gaza. Her father's family are from Gaza. And there was an event about 3 to 4 months ago where my sister called me and she told me that Aya's cousins have been murdered by the Israelis. And these are young children. These are her cousins. So her cousin was similar age to her, maybe 16, 17, and then 2 younger cousins as well, and their father. And and his family, his parents. The only one who
Sure.
survived was her auntie, who was going to visit her sister at the time. That really broke me. I just broke down into tears, just thinking that this girl has lost a huge number of her family, just like that, because the Israelis decided to bomb a house and kill everyone in it.
Sure.
So I think what I try to do with the children is remind them, look at how the people of Gaza show resilience. They always say Alhamdulillah. They don't show this weakness, even at this time of calamity. But we obviously, we're human. We're human.
Of
And
course,
the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam taught us something very important. And there's a famous example that I always relate when I see people sometimes wanting to show such a brave face, and they forget that Islam doesn't deny you of your humanity and your weakness. And it's the famous incident when Ibrahim, his son, passes away, and he cries. And then Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu says to him, "Oh, even you, O Prophet of Allah?" And he says, "Yes, even me." Because, it does, in paraphrasing, it doesn't deny us of the sadness. We're not denying the sadness when we cry, but we have lost something dear to us. And I think for us, I'm very open. I've cried more in the last 20 months than I've cried ever before. And I've lost my own mother. But I did not cry for my mother like I've cried for Gaza. And I say that because of I think as a parent, and you relate to this, and parents on the listening to this will relate, children are something special. And in fact, I visited a family friend a few years ago who lost his son. And I remember driving back from that and just saying to the kids, and I don't say it enough, and I think a lot of us maybe growing up in the West, we lose sometimes some of that emotional, what should be part of our emotional Islamic character. Yes. And I just said to them, "I love you." And sometimes we don't show you that. And I remember crying, and they all cried in the car. We all cried. And I just remember thinking, subhanAllah, this is the nature of human beings. And as Muslims, we shouldn't deny that. But at the same time, that should inspire us to continue doing the most that we can to stop this genocide and bring awareness about what the people of Gaza are suffering.
Sure. Your youngest, Omar, I believe, is 12 years old, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So, the best of us, Omar, we are like married. We are in our 40s, 50s, even mid 50s. And we sometimes what we see, I mean, I met a very dear friend yesterday, and he almost was alluding to the fact that since this genocide started, he's depressed. He's actually depressed, and he doesn't feel like going out. He doesn't feel he doesn't feel like even going on holiday with the family. He just feels really, really down. Mm-hmm. And then when I look at a 12-year-old, how do you manage to break this to a 12-year-old girl who has affiliation to that land, who has family to that land? And okay, if it's like over a very short period, you can argue that, okay, she'll find some solace on the other side, and she'll find some solace on the fact that it's ended. But this doesn't seem to end. How is your daughter managing all of this? And if I can say that emotional intelligence is what we lack, of course, the point you made. How is she managing all of this?
Yeah, so my youngest is actually my son. My daughter is a bit older than him. Yeah, so she's 16. But yeah, no, I think you try and explain what's happening in terms of giving them context. So I encourage them to watch and listen to in terms of what's happening in Gaza and Palestine, and actually further afield in the Ummah. I don't want them to have like blinkered vision where this is affecting just the people of Palestine. We're suffering across the world in Kashmir and the Rohingya Muslims and in China, and we want them to be grounded and balanced and fully aware of what's going on across the world. I think what we do is the children, I think, learn more from what they see than what you tell them. Correct. So if they see their parents and their family are fully engaged in following events and they want to help and they're being active, they're giving talks and attending demonstrations and giving charity and boycotting and discussing with their family, then that's what they see. So they see. I'm also mindful that when someone is young, you don't expect them to be able to carry the burden that we can carry.
Of course.
So just to give you an example, about a week ago, my son had a football tournament. And I wrote a post about it on LinkedIn afterwards. And I said that we, went to this football tournament, and I find it hard. I really do find it hard to attend these things at the moment because you feel so down with what's going on, especially in Gaza. And some children were crying because they lost on penalties. And I noticed my son wasn't that affected. And I think part of that was realizing how small this is in comparison to what people are suffering across the world. He sees that the children are hungry, they're being killed, they're losing their family. And I think it makes you relate your own comfort in terms of life in the UK versus the troubles and the difficulties that they're facing elsewhere. So I think a lot of it is through just leading by example and living that,
Sure.
and not kind of sitting them down and saying, I want to tell you about Palestine for 10 minutes and 15 minutes. That's not really going to cut it. But if they see you being honest to the people of Gaza and to Palestine, and really doing your best and bringing them to the masjid when you're giving a talk or a khutbah or when you're doing a demo. And I saw my children responding to that, whether it's my eldest or my youngest. They both wanted to go to the demo. They both wanted to, shout the slogans and get involved because they could see the suffering and they wanted to do their part. But only because I think they see the community, their family engaging in that way.
Yeah. And just before the break comes up, Omar, and have they themselves gone and organized events or maybe charities or maybe other events just to help and do what they can?
Yeah, my
own
eldest
back?
has. Yeah, my eldest has been involved quite a lot, whether he comes along with me to support me, but also, whether he's doing things like he did a big distro campaign for a march, for a demo that we did at an embassy. And I saw him calling up and arranging people to distribute at this masjid and that masjid, and let's get the printing done. And I was, alhamdulillah, I could see in him that what can you say, really, like that urgency to do something to aid the people of Gaza. So yes, I think it's definitely had a massive impact on them. And I can see even their priorities have changed, where they can see the need to put a lot of time and effort to the cause of the Ummah and not just their own studies and work, for example.
Sure. And do you see that if I can use the sentence, do you see the silver lining in this, that it's they have actually it's been a change for the positive? They've really come out and kind of really put themselves last and other people first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has had a big impact. As parents, you're always pushing for more and wanting them to kind of continue reassessing their lives and their priorities. But I can see a big change in that direction. As I said, the example of like my son and not being so affected by things that may have affected him a lot in the past, or even seeing my daughter wanting to wear the kafiyya even though she goes to school, and there might be people who may cause problems for her, but being determined and resilient to do that irrespective. Seeing them getting involved in social media where maybe in the past they hadn't. So I think there's a lot of positive signs, and I can see that amongst lots of Muslim youth, and actually, as we said, a lot of non-Muslim youth. So many have been dedicated to this cause over the last 20 months. So I think there's a lot of positive signs. But there was one thing that I've said time and time again with regards to the genocide. There's a lot of people who are silently against it, and they feel a real anger and frustration about what's happening. But there's actually a very small percentage that are being outspoken. And one thing that I always encourage everyone, be they adults or younger people, is to carve out a space for yourself in terms of doing something. And the way I would like to kind of explain that is, imagine if they were going for an important degree, they wanted to get into medicine. They would take so many steps to get the right experience, the right CV, making sure the application is spot on, do really well in the exams. You have to give that same level of priority for other things that you do in your life, for the Ummah, for people that are facing injustice. And I think that challenge is still there. And it's for us to kind of come out of that passively frustrated and angry, depressed mode into being someone who's an activist for change.
Absolutely. Omar, we've got a break coming up. I want to explore in the second half of the program. I want to explore some of the challenges you just mentioned your daughters faced. We're going to go into a break now, listeners, and we will be back shortly after the break.
Preparing for exam season with Inspire FM. Create flashcards with key terms and key concepts. Make a playlist of revision for you to watch online. For more exam tips, stay tuned to Inspire FM 105.1 FM.
Greystone Solicitors are committed to protecting your rights and fighting your corner to ensure you get the best possible results. Specialising in immigration matters, employment issues, family matters, personal injury, medical negligence, civil litigation and housing. Need help with your immigration problem? Greystone Solicitors provide free immigration drop-in clinics every Friday. Call Greystone Solicitors today on 01582 343 453 or visit us at 275 Dunstable Road, Luton, LU4 8BS and begin your journey towards justice today.
Want to become a volunteer this Inspire Eid? Message 0779 481822 or call 01582 481810.
Days of Dhul Hijjah on Inspire FM. Enhance your connection with Allah by engaging yourself in more voluntary prayers like the Sunnah and Nafil prayers after each Fard Salah. As well as this, attempt to perform the night prayers like Tahajjud, as Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, the best prayers after the obligatory prayers are the night prayers. Make sure to stay tuned to Inspire FM. Assalamu alaikum.
Biscott Pharmacy, your one-stop health and beauty pharmacy in Luton, stockist of over 8,000 health and beauty products. At Biscott Pharmacy, we offer a range of services, including health advice and repeat prescriptions for collection and delivery to your home. We also offer a Hajj and Umrah vaccination. Come in and see us and ask about our stop smoking service. We're open 7 days a week till late, including bank holidays. Biscott Pharmacy, 157A Biscott Road, Luton. Call 457709.
Have you heard? Have you heard the exciting news?
What exciting news is that?
To celebrate their 60th anniversary, Ambala Sweets are launching their Dubai Chocolate Barfi from Saturday 24th of May.
So we can visit the Ambala Sweets store at 211 Dunstable Road in Luton and now buy Dubai Chocolate Barfi.
Yes, it'll be available from Saturday 24th of May and so much more. That's fantastic.
Don't miss out. Dubai Chocolate Barfi and many more tasty sweet treats at Ambala, Dunstable Road in Luton and all Ambala stores.
Hi, I'm Amira and I'm a student at Barnfield College. I attended a Barnfield Open Day last year because I was interested in creating online content and I wanted to find out more about the media courses. The tutors and students were so passionate and I got to see the amazing new campus and state-of-the-art facilities. Like me, you can find the course for you at Barnfield College's Summer Open Day on the 14th of June. Visit barnfield.ac.uk to book your open day.
Inspire Eid is back, the UK's most affordable Eid festival at Stockwood Park on Friday 6th and Saturday 7th of June. 2 days of family fun with rides costing just £1 or £2, incredible world food and outdoor cinema, bazaar, and yes, entry is free. A big thank you to our sponsors, Kashmir Open Relief Trust, Wolf & Co Solicitors, Hannah Solicitors, Butt Solicitors, the University of Bedfordshire, Community Interest Luton, and Community Training Portal. Inspire Eid. Together, we celebrate.
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 7:30.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the listeners on the Parenting Show on Inspire FM. Today I'm joined by Omar Hussein, who is talking about how we discuss the issues related to Gaza with our children. If you want to say, or if you have are very shy on ringing in, give us a text on 07779 481 812. If you want to have a chat with Omar, put some questions to Omar, feel free to give us a call on 01582 481 822. Welcome back, Omar. Are we still there?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Omar, just before before the break, you said your daughter had a bit of problems when she wore the scarf to college or to school or wherever she is. How did you navigate this pressure? Because I remember when this horrendous one-sided, if you want to call it, let's call it what it is, genocide started. There was so much pressure on people. I know schools and colleges started rolling out policies and about the flag, about the scarf, about any speech regarding Palestine, and it was almost like a whitewash, a censorship of no, that's not allowed. How did you manage that with your children?
Yeah, so I think you're right. There was definitely a concerted policy to try and silence any dissent and questioning of the genocide in Gaza. But as I said, it's the kids look up to you. They look up to you and they say, do my parents speak out? Do my family speak out? Do my community speak out? Does my imam speak out? Are they all kind of scared and not willing to, be present in regards to this issue? And there's a few other examples, actually. There was one example that came to mind is about boycotting. So even though I don't myself see boycotting as a measure to stop what's happening, I think there is something to be said about its solidarity with the people of Gaza, that people who are facing this genocide look to us to see, what are you doing to stand with us? So a lot of us have given up like certain drinks and stopped going to certain coffee shops. And I'm sure many of us are on that journey. And my son noticed that at school, that some Muslim boys weren't doing that. They were just continuing to go to McDonald's and they were still continuing to have the same old drinks. And he said, he was really surprised and it was a bit of a shock to him. So we try to encourage him. How do you discuss that? How do you explain that to people around you? Because obviously you want to be someone who changes those around them, their friends. This was really important. And my younger son, the one I was referring to earlier, he's actually homeschooled. And in the homeschooling network, in one of the workshops, a group of children were actually drawing the Israeli flag, the Zionist flag. And that shocked him. These are children that he'd played with in the past and got on with, and now he saw them, drawing a flag that he knows is representing a genocide that's taken the lives of thousands of children at that point. So these are big challenges for children to navigate. So we encourage them to stay true to what they believe in. Don't show weakness, but navigate it with wisdom, and keep your cool. Don't lose it. Don't be silly. So that's something that I've experienced where I had problems because of some of my social media posts. But I try to show that you don't just react in an aggressive manner when you're trying to win the argument. You need to ensure that you get your points across with facts and information that is compelling. And I think that's a lot of the time what we try to encourage them not to, especially with youth, they can be very hot-headed because they've got very zealous. But what you want to do is make sure that passion is directed in a way that's effective, that you're actually aiding the cause, not someone who's just shouting and being seen as loud and disruptive.
Yeah, and this brings me to another point. Of course, when this started when the killing of innocent civilians, man, woman, and child, they started. There was so much history that people had to catch up on. Because every time you were coming on television, and it was almost portrayed that this all started in October, and then the very balanced view, even the non-Muslim would say, hang on, it didn't start in October, it started in the first Nakba. And then what's Nakba? And then you had to read, and there was almost like 40 to 50 years of catch-up being done.
Yeah.
Did you find this was very encouraging for children to go away and research and read and know their history? Or did you find that the kids were a little bit lost with all of this?
Yeah, no, it's definitely, you were right, though. There was this huge catch needed for the whole of society, really.
Correct.
So, it didn't start on the 7th of October, was probably our first major campaign as a collective, as the masses, really. I think we rose to that challenge really well. People explained so many examples of what the people of Palestine and people of Gaza were facing for over 70 years. For some children, obviously, this would have been a completely new issue. If you think about the last major event in Gaza, it was at least a few years ago, and they wouldn't have been aware of all the specifics. So I did feel there was a real passion for children to learn about this. I gave a talk recently at a masjid, And a couple of the best questions were from children in the audience.
Correct. Yeah.
One said to me, how do you actually counter the arguments that there isn't a genocide, that this has all been exaggerated? And I just explained to him, look, we look at facts. There's so much information out there. You need to collate that information and present it in a compelling way. 100 people do not get killed seeking aid in any normal situation. The Flower Massacre, which was over a year ago, when they actually slaughtered and injured over 900 people. So I think you have to substantiate it with evidence. You don't want them to get into a position where you just say, well, we're in the right. No, you want them to be compelling when they make those arguments. I think it's really important. These are really important points. So another point that I make is to be balanced. And I mean that not to ever say that there's any question about what's going on. This is a clear-cut, one-sided genocide. But what I mean balance with information and facts and figures, and not being someone who dismisses information that comes to you. So I'll give you an example what I mean. So some people said there does seem to be occasionally food in Gaza. Why are the prices so high? And I know from a lot of people on the ground in Gaza that unfortunately many businessmen have taken advantage of the situation, and they have charged really ridiculous rates for things like flour and other essentials. So we shouldn't deny that. We shouldn't be seen as someone who denies the facts that are clearly evident. So I think that's really important when you're explaining to children how to be effective in presenting their points. They need to be very, very clued up on the facts and figures and information and the history, and not just go in there ill-informed, really.
Sure. And the other point I'd like to draw upon is, from the playground to the workplace to the wider country to the wider world, there's the criteria that's been developed in the minds of many people now that might is right. Okay. And this, sometimes people just carry this idea, and even children, just because it happens to be there and it happens to be the case. Surely we don't want our children growing up with that criteria of judging what's right and what's wrong just because of might. There has to be, because there's been a whole discussion about a moral compass. Okay. Yeah. And of course, I would like my children, and I would like everyone's children, to grow up to have a very strong moral compass, and not to lose it at the sight of money, at the sight of power, at the sight of status, at the sight of befriending the powerful or befriending the one with a lot of money. Do you find that amongst the youth that this idea is really actually was challenged heavily over the last 2 years, or do you find that the youth still hold on to this might is right?
Yeah, I think these situations, these events that we go through in our life, they should be an opportunity to culture our children, educate them. An example that I often give about what's happening in Palestine, and particularly in Gaza, is that we should look back to our deen in a practical sense. A lot of the time we see Islam in a very historical context. So I'll give you an example. There was a number of churches that were destroyed in Gaza, and that was a surprise to many people. They weren't even aware that there were Christians in Gaza, and certainly not churches. And in one case, it's the third oldest church in the entire world. And what was shocking really is that all these churches and mosques and hospitals and schools and markets and homes have been destroyed. And as you say, it just gives the indication to the world, or the signals to the world, that might is right. We can do what we want. We can bomb this whole strip to smithereens. And it made me think of a time when Umar al-Khattab, radhiyallahu anhu, who was the second leader of the Muslims after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was an extremely powerful man. And in fact, when I was telling the story, someone stopped me and he said he was the most powerful man in the world at that time. And I actually thought, you're right, he was the most powerful man in the world at that time. When he walked into Al-Quds, Umar al-Khattab had actually brought down the two biggest empires, the superpowers of the time, the Romans and the Persians. And when you think about your kids who are learning history or politics and discussing things at school, you have to give them real examples of what it means to be a statesman, a leader, a fair, just leader. And when he walked into Jerusalem, he famously didn't pray in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre because he was worried that Muslims after him may take the church as a place of worship for themselves, as a masjid.
Sure.
So he didn't pray there. And I use that example to explain to my own children and to others, look how, even though he was the most powerful man in the world, he did not abuse that power. He still respected the places of worship of other faiths. And look at, on the other hand, those who have power absolutely destroying all all examples of faith within Gaza in terms of the mosques and the churches.
Absolutely.
So I think these are the examples that we need to build. So it's not just that might is not right. It's not the basis for the way we think, but give them the examples that bring that to life from our own deen as well.
Sure. The other thing connected to this, might is right, is that quite often we find throughout this whole situation, again over 2 years, that's been what's been happening is, how do just to talk about the horrific scenes and images that come out of there, do you filter any of these images, Umar, to your children? I do look at the age appropriateness and because just because you filter it doesn't mean that there's any less concern or any less feeling, but of course people will get affected with this. We're not talking about here just someone with a bruise or a cut. We're not talking about someone who's just fallen over. We're not talking even about someone who's just escaped a house fire. These, what we see on our screens are, sometimes I find it really, really difficult to look at some of these. How do you deal with that with the kids?
Yeah, so I think you have to judge your own kids in terms of, you don't want to give them nightmares and distress them, because ultimately we've got a responsibility as parents to ensure that their mental health is maintained as well. So certainly you don't want to shield them where they think that life is fine and there's nothing going on in the world and people are not suffering. But at the same time, if there's an extremely graphic image that would shock you as an adult and you think it could distress your child, there's no need to necessarily show that. In fact, I met an older brother over the weekend, and he said to me he can't see them. He goes, if he sees them, he absolutely feels unable to do anything. He becomes almost completely, he goes into shock because it just is so unbearable to see those images of children that are torn to shreds. And I can understand that. So I think for me personally, I don't shield that for myself, and I do post them on social media because I want people to see the truth. But I don't go out of my way to my children saying, "Oh, look at this image. That's so distressing." But at the same time, I don't hide the facts and figures and the general images of destruction and the children who are suffering and crying and people crying over their dead. I remember I don't know if you remember this one video that really hit me, and I did show it to my children because it was so powerful from the child. Where he cried over the body of his father, and he said, "Who's going to wake me up for Fajr, Salat al-Fajr?"
Oh, no.
And I don't know if you remember that video. And
yes.
I remember thinking, subhanallah, this young child has not only lost his father, but what he remembers is who wakes me up for Fajr. So that is more powerful than any image by itself. Just that image of a child crying over the dead body of his father.
Yeah, and not to take away from Palestine at all, but even more powerful than an alarm clock waking you up for Fajr, which some of us rely on. That thought that he has lost his alarm clock, he has lost his father.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's the kind of relationship he had with his father. His father's relationship with him was not PS5, wasn't like going out, wasn't buying him the latest brands, but it was Fajr. It was waking him up. It was like, it's very moving, and it's very heart wrenching. Omar, when I was raised, when I was being nurtured, and generally the community in my generation, they were being nurtured. I'm going to be very frank and say this on air very openly. We were nurtured with an Islam that was very much us and them. So it's us, the Muslims, and them, the rest of the world. And I think we've come to a crossroads now where Gaza has kind of defined them, and it's not it's not non-Muslims. Them is not non-Muslims anymore. Not from where I'm sitting, because just over 3-4 weeks ago there was almost 500,000 people or 100,000 people out in London demonstrating, and majority were non-Muslims.
Correct.
So this shift in terms of engagement for our children must be really refreshing and enriching, because we had a very closed view of non-Muslims. Unfortunately, it's just the way that Islam was given to us. It was very us and them, and this is the natural consequences of the first generation landing here and didn't know how to interact and didn't know how to position Islam amongst a non-Muslim society. But now, as things have evolved and things, this us and them now, do the kids actually, do they have an appreciation of really who is them, and it's not the wider non-Muslim?
I mean, I'd like to think that, alhamdulillah, for my upbringing, I'll give the credit to my father and mother. This wasn't something that I grew up thinking. And I really did see that there was a different them, and those them were the elites, those them were the political class, those them were the establishment media. They were not my neighbors, they were not my colleagues, they were not the people who, like us, struggle financially with our own challenges and with our own children. And I think Gaza has definitely blown that up completely. That concept is now completely out of the water. That idea that it's us and them, as in the average Brit or the average American. What we've seen, in fact, is something that has brought people closer together. As you said, that demonstration where so many people came together. In fact, I was walking with my wife. I was there, and a nurse from Devon came up and said, "Oh, could you tell me the way to the station?" I said, "Oh, I also work in the NHS," and I could see her happiness. And I just thought, what has brought this Palestinian from London with this nurse from Devon, this middle-aged white lady who's a nurse? And it was quite amazing, really, and it inspires me to see so many of them being so proactive about this cause. What I think is really important is for them to understand, as you say, what is the them? The them is not your average non-Muslim. That's a really wrong way of looking at it.
Absolutely.
And I interviewed someone when I was out in Jordan, who was actually in the US military, but she'd completely turned her back on the whole system. And she realized all the propaganda against Islam was completely being perpetrated or being pushed by who? By the establishment. And they are the elites, the media, who have vested interests in trying to undermine Islam and Muslims. So as soon as you break that barrier, it's amazing what happens. And in fact, we think it's just us and them from our perspective, but they're doing the same thing from their perspective, and they also don't know why they're doing it. They're doing it because of the media pushing that narrative. So I'll give you an example. She posted something on social media in Jordan when she was there, and it was a really innocent video, but it really showed how deep that propaganda was. And she just showed like a husband and wife walking down together in Amman, a grandfather playing with his grandchildren, people playing together chess, and people just interacting as families and communities. And she said, look, they're just like us, they love like us, they laugh like us, they eat like us. And I thought, subhanAllah, imagine how much propaganda she had witnessed for her to have to do that, for her to have to counter that narrative. So I think it goes both ways. Those elites actually want to keep us both fighting each other, so they can just cream off all the wealth and all the power in society, while we're just fighting off stupid right-wing concepts, or people who have a very centric view that, it's Muslims against all non-Muslims. In fact, we need to be the ones who challenge that concept.
I was, Omar, just to add to this, I was participating in a Twitter X space once over the issue of Gaza. And I mentioned how the people of Ireland have so much affinity with Muslims over the issue of Gaza. And suddenly this woman from Ireland popped up on the space, on the Twitter space, and she spoke about how they had suffered the famine and how they had seen a lot of things that the people of Gaza are seeing now. And that really, really showed me that the affinity for the people of Gaza, this shared suffering, isn't something unique. It's almost everywhere you look at South Africa, you look at Ireland, all these places actually share a lot of similarities as to what is happening in Gaza at the moment. And this is so important for the children to know this. Otherwise, it's so dangerous to just grow up in a very black and white, binary 1 and 0 worldview, because this is very dangerous, because it actually feeds the very incorrect narrative we want children to have, to grow up and become statesmen who can actually balance between right and wrong, good and bad, and what's fact and what's propaganda. So there is a whole host of countries and people and nations out there who find close affinity to what's happening in Gaza, to what happened to them as well.
Yeah. My son's a big sports fan, and he watches a lot of this UFC and boxing and other things. So whenever there's a really big pro-Palestinian sports person, he goes, "Oh, look what's happened now! Look what's happened now!" And it's interesting how we talk about influencers and how much influence they do have actually over the youth, because when they see them standing up for something like a just cause like Palestine, or be it another cause, South Africa, Kashmir, etc., you can see that they really look up to those personalities, and they go beyond just their own personalities and their fast cars and their life and their success on the pitch or on the boxing ring. They actually see people stand for something worthwhile, and I think it's really interesting. I do agree with you totally. We need to explain that point, and it's really important to link reality with how Islam views something. So you don't just talk about the examples of justice in Islam in a historical context. As soon as you can show those same examples, how they relate to our lives today, they become very, very powerful. And that's what I like to do. I like to go back to what happened during the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba. How did they treat people with justice? Why did they not mistreat people of other faiths or people who are weak? And you really get to show how Islam relates to today's time in terms of the injustices and the oppression that we see.
Sure. On the title of this flyer on the show you're coming is how, we're looking to build compassionate and conscious children. And it comes back to when you talked about UFC. I think for all our young footballing people who love football, I think Gary Lineker took the whole football world and even the wider world and politicians. It took them by surprise and actually stuck his neck out for what is justice.
He did,
and this should be actually looked upon to say that, look, normal people feel the real problem. They actually can see what is going on. And it's almost that we're living in a world of the emperor's new clothes. It's only the emperor and his merry men who think he's dressed.
Spot on. Yeah, absolutely spot on. I've used that example myself, actually. That's exactly the point. Yeah.
We're quite frankly, and why I use that example, even for younger children, such stories should be brought to light. Such stories like the emperor's new clothes should be correlated to what's going on in the world today. And this will sit very well with them. And like I said, Gary Lineker is one of I have a lot of respect for him for what he did. He went against the status, against the money, against his job, against the career, against everything, to stand up for one simple thing: justice and truth, of course.
Yeah. No, Ali, you're completely right. I mean, I think the Gary Lineker example had a huge impact on many young boys and even, people across the UK, because that was clear. He just stood for what he believed was right, and he faced the consequences. This is a person that a lot of people have grown up with, watching Match of the Day and other football commentary programs, etc. And they see him talking about Gaza. They see him talking about crying about the children of Gaza. Very passionate and very emotional, story really of how it impacted him. And I think that's really something we need to show. There's other examples like the sister Ibtihal from Microsoft, who accounted them for their complicity in genocide using the AI tools. But what a lot of people don't know is that she had a Hindu colleague who also did the same thing, a lady who did the same thing, where she also lost her job for the same cause. And I've actually had interactions with lots of non-Muslims who've had the same thing. So you're right. We've seen people stand for justice from across society.
Omar, we are down to 9 seconds of the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem,
and I'd love to have you on at another later stage, inshallah.
No problem, inshallah. It was good to
Jazakallah khair to
have
all
a-
the listeners.
Coming up next, Democracy Now!